All right, how is everyone doing tonight? Very excited to be here and go through the fastest way to save $5,000 without limiting lifestyle. Now, obviously, again, using some new software again. So if you're here, please let me know so I can make sure that you can actually hear and see me. There's like a 10-second delay, I think, or something like that. So everything that I'm seeing there is a little bit behind, but let me know that you're here and we can jump straight into it. Wonderful. All right. Awesome. Well, the fastest way to save $5,000 without limiting your lifestyle. Why is that important? Because if you can't save money with speed, with consistency, all while enjoying the journey, you will continue to be disappointed, frustrated, stressed, and genuinely scared about your future. You know, the wheels will keep turning, but you won't go anywhere and never be able to create real, lasting wealth. And so what we're covering tonight, obviously, is your current situation. We're going to talk through some of the problems that you might be facing right now, but also we're going to jump into the fastest way to 5,000. And then we're going to go through some good examples as well. So I think there's a few people on. So if you're on, please let me know. It's good to do these things. I'm not sure though. All right, we'll keep moving anyway. I haven't seen anyone say, yeah, they're here. So I might, we'll keep pressing on anyway. Awesome. So some important assumptions for tonight. Obviously that you want to get your next 5,000 saved fast, that you want to enjoy the journey, but you also want to work together with your partner to achieve it. There we go. Paula's on, Nell's on. Fantastic. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate that. And then obviously the other assumption here is that you won't use this information for evil. Look, I'm not sure how you would, but that is definitely an assumption that I'm making. So your current situation, the problems that you may be experiencing right now. The first one here obviously is overspending. The idea of being emotionally or mentally triggered and overspending. You know, it's human nature to spend every single dollar that you make, and it's driven very much by core human needs. And one thing you definitely need to understand as well is that about 95% of all decisions when it comes to making a purchase involve 95%, are an emotional component to that, which is crazy. We have billion-dollar corporations out there who have spent so much money to work out exactly what to say, the image to use to trigger you emotionally and mentally into a spending space as well, or spending mindset. Now, obviously, the next one is cutting back. This is where you are focused on cutting back everything to save money, you know. And let me tell you, this is not a good way to be, believe it or not. As much as you think or believe that's the way that you're meant to do it, it's not a good way to do it. It's like a fad diet. It's one of those things where you're so restrictive and you just restrict everything and you do it. You might be able to do it for like 3 or 4 weeks and see some results, but then guess what? The wheels fall off as well. So cutting back isn't the most effective way to save money either. Now, obviously, knowledge not equaling action. This is basically where you're stuck in this space of just trying to seek out more and more knowledge, you know, where you're not kind of really taking action. You know, knowledge doesn't always equal action. And when you're in this space, you're really just trying to, you're basically cramming more information into an already packed space, and it's really not fruitful as well. Now, the next one is obviously apathetic. Now, this is the idea where, you know, you've tried multiple times over and over again, and guess what? It hasn't worked. So what's the natural consequence of that? You generally become a bit apathetic. Your outlook is not great. You don't think that things are going to be any different, or they could or possibly be different. So obviously that's not a really good thing or place to be in as well. Now, obviously accountability as well, and not having no targets, kind of doing all the work alone. Guess what? When you're working alone, there genuinely is no accountability. You know, you're answering to yourself, and particularly in the context of a relationship, it doesn't really work. But also the no targets feeds into this next one as well, where you don't have any genuine or very clear goals. It's interesting. A lot of people will have kind of concepts or things that they're chasing, and one day they want to get here. But what we want to see is really, you know, dialed in specific goals, because saving for the sake of saving, it doesn't work. If you're trying to achieve something with your financial leftovers, you're never going to achieve anything significant. So that's definitely things. So if you're waiting to the end of your pay period to see what you got left to put it aside, there's not ever going to be anything left, let me tell you. The next one is all about growing up and not understanding the impact that has on you. So your lived experience up until this very moment has an impact on the way in which you handle and deal with your money. Their own circumstances growing up that leads to the certain things that they do with their money. And when you don't understand the impact that has and you haven't processed and worked through that, it really is a big problem. The next one is the idea of being focused on the numbers, stuck kind of fixing or tweaking your budget, and this is not a really great place to be in either. Obviously, when we're taught about money, we're taught very much in a math predominant field, like it's numbers, and we're kind of adding, subtracting, etc. But that's really, it's not even half of the picture. What I was talking about before, the idea of your beliefs, attitudes, actions, behaviors, all of that has a much more important role than being stuck and fixed. Focused on the numbers. The other one is your relationship. So, you might be working together on everything else. You might be managing a house, a life together, might even be raising kids together, and money doesn't fall into that category. Like, you're not kind of doing it together really well. Sure, you might talk about it here and there, but the conversation is generally kind of reactive. You've got a bill coming in, you go, oh, I've got to pay this bill this week. And it's not really anything more than that. It realistically is when you're doing the work alone. And money really probably needs to be one of those areas that we pick up and do well. And obviously the last one here is the cost of living. Everything is more expensive. We've seen a massive increase in that in the last 2 to 3 years. And you're probably starting to realize that, hey, I can't keep winging this. Maybe you had enough disposable income before all the increases to kind of wing it, but you're probably in a space now where, hey, we really need to get on top of this because we can't wing it anymore. All right. And all of these are wonderful examples of what I call financial robbers. So they're attitudes, beliefs, behaviors that aren't serving you at all. They aren't helping you in any way, shape, or form. And you might think that you've been doing the right thing for so long, but let me tell you, these things are going to rob and steal from you trying to achieve what you want to achieve. Now, for your current situation, I'm just using this income breakdown here as a bit of a imagery to kind of talk about the idea of where our money goes. So we all have a certain level of income, and we have a certain level of essential spending, non-essential spending. There's a certain amount of waste for all of us. And then there's, we're trying to save money at the same time. So this breakdown is probably a really good way to look at it. And it's going to help us go through what we're going to go through tonight as well. Now, obviously, I want to point out first and foremost and acknowledge the impact that inflation has had on the area of essential, the idea of the cost of housing, all of that stuff, the supermarket bills, buying food, keeping the lights on at home, the bills have basically doubled. And I understand that space, but we're not going to focus in on the essential side of things at this point. Realistically, the fastest way to 5,000 is by focusing in on this non-essential waste and savings category. So I'm going to break down, we're going to go through each of those and how to tackle those and the solutions for each of those. So one of the things, obviously, that I want to do too is provide you with a bit of an example. Now, they're whole numbers just to keep it as easy as possible of what these categories might look like at the moment for you. So the idea is that you're making $2,000 a week. There's 1,000 going there, 500 going on a non-essential, 300 in waste, and 200 in saving. Now, obviously, food appears twice in essential, non-essential. I guess there's a difference between food to live and survive and going out with friends and having a meal and stuff like that. So that's probably just the crossover there. But those are the 4 categories. That's an example of what potentially could be a breakdown for you at the moment. But let's keep moving. So like I said before, all of these areas require different solutions. Okay. And I kind of want to start from the right to the left. And obviously, talking about savings and the idea of savings, for a lot of us, like I was talking about before, is that we wait to see what we've got left, without acknowledging that it's basically human nature to spend every dollar that you make. So one of the best ways that you can prioritize spending is by moving it across as soon as you get paid, out of sight, out of mind, see how you go, living without it. And it's one of the things that I do straight out the gate with a lot of clients that I work with is that we set what's known as a savings baseline, where we kind of decide straight out the gate, we say, okay, what's your nominated figure that you want to save per week, per fortnight, whatever it is. Let's just start moving that across and see how we go. And obviously the concept is that we're doing it before there's any sort of spending, and we're really prioritizing that space as well. It's the old, principle of paying yourself first, all that kind of wonderful stuff that you hear. We really want to engage in that space. Now, the next category of waste, the single biggest kind of lever that we have to pull when it comes to the money that we do waste and spend on things that are convenient is literally by raising the awareness of what we're actually doing with our money. Okay. And one of the best ways that you can do that is literally by sitting down without the purpose of guilt or shame, but sitting down on a regular basis, generally per week would be better because there's less data to go through, and review all of your spending. Kind of really look into where your money's going, kind of understand where it's traveling, where you're spending it, and what that space looks like. And that's one of the things I also do with my clients straight up the gate as well, is we instigate what's known as team meetings. Now, they're created to kind of be a space not only to raise awareness, okay, but also we look, because we review the spending each week, but also we plan a week ahead, and we have action items, we have open items that, expenses that we're aware of that are coming in a few months, or, whatever that might be. And we also have a space on there to, go through or list out how much we were able to save given our savings baseline. So what our target is and what we were able to do. Now, obviously the sole purpose of this, obviously in raising awareness, is always the fact that you become more intentional. Like, it's a natural byproduct of becoming more and more aware of what you're doing with your money, is that you genuinely become more and more intentional, particularly when it comes to this idea of waste. If you see that you're wasting money on a weekly basis and it's like $100 every week, 150, $200 every week, what happens? You're not going to keep doing that, are you? You genuinely, naturally become more intentional with your money. Now, as far as the non-essential things here, this is always a really, really interesting one for me, because I feel like whenever you're focused in on cutting back and sacrificing everything, this is where you live. You live in this space where you're just getting rid of all of your non-essential, like, okay, so subscription's gone, I'm not going to go and get my hair done, or I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. And you start throwing everything out to try and save as much as possible. But what I'm a big believer on, and I think a better question to maybe ask yourself here, is realistically, what are the 2 or 3 things that I love to do that bring me like a vast amount of enjoyment that I don't want to live without? Like, these are the things that we want to build in, because what we want to do here is, while asking ourselves that question, we also want to start setting targets for what we're trying to get to. And you may not have anything right now, so hey, go pick the $5,000, just go for it and say, okay, that's our first target. Because then guess what we have? We have the target, the thing that we want to achieve, that $5,000 in the bank, but also at the same time, we have those 2 or 3 things that we want to be able to continue to enjoy. And guess what happens is that you will find your balance. For a vast majority of people out there, when they cut and they sacrifice absolutely everything that they love, they cannot find that balance. So what happens naturally is they can't keep doing it. It becomes like that fad diet, or that cycle, on again, off again, kind of budgeting as well. So that's probably the best way to describe that. So that's the solutions. And obviously the purpose of the solutions is to get to this space here, to get to a space where our savings and investing, or whatever that might be, even just savings in general, is increasing. We're minimizing our waste, and we're shrinking our non-essential. We're not getting rid of it altogether. We're just kind of shrinking it a little bit. Now, it's probably hard to see because those images are a bit different there, but obviously the concept here for tonight is that the essential has not changed. That's been the same. Where we've seen the movement has been in the savings space, in the waste space, and in the non-essential space. So it's increase in savings, reduction of waste, reduction in non-essential. Now, obviously, again, highlighting that I'm not getting rid of everything as well, but that's what we're seeing, okay? And what we want to see at the same time as we do these things is that we're working together as a team with our spouse, with our partner, and we're on the same page, and we're both fully aware of what's going on. Because the really beautiful thing that happens when we do that is not only there's a togetherness, a synergy, but at the same time, when we experience any sort of extra income, any sort of more income, whether that be a bonus, or you get your tax back, or you work overtime, now that you're on top of this and you're both fully aware, and we've taken care of all these areas, is that you get to finally decide what you do with this money. For a vast majority of people out there, any sort of extra money that they have coming in throughout the year, they're counting on to survive. They're counting on for whatever reason. But if we can genuinely get on top of these, do these 3 things, and really focus in on it, we end up with a cap kind of over our life, and our lifestyle is kind of capped. We don't experience any sort of lifestyle increase, or I guess it's called a lifestyle creep too, where your income increases, so does your spending. We avoid that by doing this. So any extra income, any pay rises, anything like that, we now have the power to tell it where to go instead of it telling us where it needs to go. All right. Now, moving into some examples. This is James and Natasha. When I first started working with them, and I'm not sure if it's increased since then, but they were making $190,000 per annum as a household. Now, obviously, Natasha was working alone, so guess what? She was stressed beyond belief, and James had his head in the sand. He was quite happy to do so, and he will fully admit that himself. He was quite happy living with his head in the sand. But, by doing these things and focusing on these areas, they were able to get to 20K after 12 weeks. And guess what? There's no more stress. There's more options and flexibility with their kids, and they're working together more effectively, which was an incredible result for them. They've done really, really well. The next one is Jacob and Georgia. Now, obviously, when I first started working with them, it's not true anymore, but it was a single income house. Georgia was on maternity leave, and guess what? She was stressed out of her brain, and the single income was $120,000, and she was absolutely focused on the numbers. She was just focusing about, where I can move things, what I can do, and moving money over to pay this thing over here to then put it back over there. So we focused in on that. We focused in on these things, and the result for them was 30K saved after 6 months. With no more stress and more memorable experience as a family. I love actually seeing these guys on social media. Georgia's all over it. She puts a lot of family stuff up there, and I get to see them doing fun things as a family. And, it's really great to kind of see, knowing that they've changed things and turned things around in such an incredible way. But they're also more open and honest in their communication around money. One of the things I see quite often is that communication is very reactionary, where you're just kind of talking about this bill that you've got to pay and this other thing. So we can't do this because we've got to do that. But what we're seeing with Jacob and Georgia is a more proactive communication, a communication where they're really actively involved. And, Jacob never really used to be involved, but he is all over it now. He calls himself the foreman, and I think he likes that role. If I'm being honest, he probably really likes calling himself the foreman. But that's their situation, and a wonderful example. Now, obviously, we also have Pete and Deb. They're actually only about 11 weeks into their journey with me. Their joint income is $160,000. When they first met me, Deb was stressed beyond belief, and Deb was working alone. There was no accountability or direction. I mean, she has some goals that she wants to achieve. She has a business that she's running that she wants to be able to get to X amount of money in the bank, so then she can quit her job and focus in on growing her business, which would be fantastic for them. But when they first met them, she was in there alone, and there was no real kind of direction about how they were going to do it. But the result for them was 16K after just 10 weeks. It's probably even more now as we're talking right now, because I think they're into week 11. But there's no more stress, and they're achieving their goals, which is great. And, they're communicating effectively, and they honestly feel really united. One of the things I've loved seeing about these two is Pete has really just picked up his game. Deb used to be working alone, but he's really grabbed hold of this and just gone, do you know what? I want to help Deb quit her job and start a business. And so he's just dived in there with a wholeheartedly, and is doing absolutely everything he can, and he's doing an amazing job as well. And the last one here is Brenton and Janelle. So when they first came into my world, joint income was 150K. Janelle was stressed. She was working alone. She was focused on the numbers. And again, it was this space where they had no goals, they had no direction, and they were absolutely winging it. 100% winging it. And they were kind of, saving here and there, but then they'd have to pull out of their savings to pay for something that they didn't account for. But there definitely was this sense of winging it. But the result for them is now that $15,000 gets saved every 10 weeks consistently. And it's incredible. It's been years, like maybe a year now of doing that consistently, and there's no more stress. They're feeling secure. They're doing a fantastic job. They're on the same page. They're focused. And Brenton actually coined this term on one of the calls we had, where he's like, I feel like we have the financial edge now. And I'm like, that's such a good way to put it. They're working together so well, so focused on what's ahead. And, Brenton's actually been able to start a business, which has been really wonderful for them and their family. So they're seeing some really incredible things as well. So that's fantastic. Did I miss the training? Was it just to fill out the calculator link? No, that was basically the last slide of all of the slides that we've gone through tonight. So I think you might have missed it, but that's okay. Once I finish this live, I'll make sure to send you through the replay link as well. But obviously, yeah, the main focus of the training was those 3 key areas. Is there a script for a team meeting? Great question. I do have a form for that. I'd be more than willing to send that through for you, Jennifer. Not a problem at all. I can I'll send that through you via Messenger once we jump off. Cool. No worries, Tanya. Not a problem at all, love. Always happy to help. Is your training for high incomes? No, not necessarily. A lot of the training, I mean, the examples are probably sitting in that higher category or middle category, if we're being honest. But a lot of what I do still applies whatever your income level. I mean, if you go through and do those things, go through and, set the baseline, go through and do the regular team meetings and, find the balance, between achieving what you want to achieve, but also the things that you want to enjoy and continue to enjoy, you're still going to get there. And it's going to make sure that you're doing it in a consistent manner as well. Thanks, Paula. Thanks for the encouragement there. Hopefully that answers your question, Tanya. I mean, it's not just about the level of income. Obviously, that plays a pretty key role. But I mean, even the example there for Jacob and Georgia was incredible. They spend 120K. Like the income was 120K, and they still got to 30K in 6 months. Just became aware of how much is wasted from my income. Thank you. Okay, became very aware of it. Okay, I'm interested to talk a little bit more about that, Chad, for sure. Oh, great question, Tanya. Full budgeting system. Well, it's not necessarily just about the numbers. I think the numbers play a role for sure, but there's probably more a behavioral element to what we do as well. We're focused in on making sure that we're doing the right things for us based on what we want to achieve at the right times. I think to kind of look at it as just a budgeting system, sure, we do get into that stuff. We do break that down and we look for a better, more effective and I guess a more efficient and simple way of doing things. But that is just a really small component of the whole things that we look at and everything that we look at. So it's not so much a budgeting system. So yes, but no. I'd probably say it's a small part of what I do. It's more so the attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, and seeing that change through. Because obviously we want to make sure that you've got everything that you need to keep going and keep kicking goals. And keep saving at a really great rate too. And obviously something that you're able to maintain for the long term. Does this work if my goal is debt repayment instead of savings? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, $5,000 off your debt is still, I guess, still the goal of $5,000. It's probably one thing that I would probably say though, one of the things you want to avoid is a situation where you are just solely paying down debt. Because one of the real dangers there around that stuff is then not having money for potentially when something goes wrong, not having liquid money and then having to go back into debt to kind of deal with, whatever problems come up as well. So I'd probably say, if your goal is debt repayment instead of savings, I'd probably say, hey, let's maybe split the difference and do both at the same time. Still aggressively pay down the debt, but also make sure that we're saving at the same time, some amount anyway, just to kind of protect ourselves. Yeah, look, mindset, hugely important, and habit changes. Honestly, I would say it's more important. And I often reflect on a Benjamin Hardy book called Willpower Doesn't Work, where he literally talks about this idea of willpower being like half the story, where it's also very much about this idea of changing the environment in which you manage your money and changing the environment in which you live to ensure that you can actually achieve the goals that you have. The idea of white knuckling your way to success is not going to work. It's especially when it's only half the picture. It's a great book. If you want a book recommendation, Willpower Doesn't Work, I would absolutely say, hey, dive into that one. But it is definitely a part of, major focus of what I do is not just, that idea of, willpower and kind of being motivated, but also that component of changing habits, changing behaviors, changing the environment in which you're managing your money. And sometimes that can be the environment around you and your spouse working together, you and your partner working together. Like, what's that environment like? And maybe that's an environment that we can make better, more favorable to allow you to, really see some change in that space as well. So it's definitely not an area that's ignored in what I do too, the idea of relationship and, kicking those goals and that communication side of things. That is absolutely a huge part of what I do as well. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense for you too, Chad, the idea of debt repayment instead of savings. I'd encourage you, mate, to get that done. This will be available to watch as a recording. I had to pop away from the screen to deal with kids. Absolutely. Yeah. I feel that one in my bones, 100%. Look, my kids are thankfully asleep at the moment, but I will send this to you afterwards for sure for you to go through. Yeah, kids can be crazy. I love my kids, but they're not great sleepers. So I'm surprised I haven't been interrupted, if I'm being honest. So there you go. Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, so hopefully, great. Awesome, Chad. I was about to say, I hope that makes sense, and it does. That's good, mate. Awesome.